Hi, and welcome back to Small Caps. I'm your host, Jess Fertig, and today we are welcoming back Andrew Vigar, who is the Executive Chair of Terra Uranium Limited. The ASX ticker code is T92. Hi, Andrew. It's so good to have you back on the show.
It's a pleasure to see you again, Jess. It's only been a couple of months, but boy, we've been busy.
I know, it looks like it. Now, Andrew, before we get into some of the detail about, your plans or some of the stuff that you've done recently and your plans for 2025, can you just give our small caps audience, for those who aren't quite familiar with the business, just a brief overview
Mhm.
of your projects and where they're located?
Yeah, sure, Jess. We're a uranium company. We're just purely uranium. We're ASX listed T92, but all our operations are based in Canada, mostly in the Athabasca Basin, which contains the largest and richest deposits in the world. There's some very unusual geology there, and I could bore everybody for an hour on the geology because it's terribly exciting. But we're talking more about the company and what our prospects are. And it's and a small project a little further north at Amer Lake, which we've had a lot of trouble pinning down the prospector who we're buying it off. Lovely guy, but awfully hard to pin down. So apologies to our shareholders, but we're still working on it, and it still should close relatively soon. I don't think we're working this winter though. It's more likely in the summer.
Okay, interesting enough. So, Andrew, thank you for that. So, now, last time we caught up, the company had announced a non-binding letter of intent with
Mm.
Atha Energy Corporation. Now, what has come of that agreement since we last chatted, and how does that agreement, or how does that partnership, should we say that strategic partnership, fit in with the company's long-term strategy?
Yeah, it's been very important for us because we had developed our projects to the stage where they're drill ready, but we're a little deeper in the Athabasca Basin than the existing mines. So these existing mines are depths from surface down to 400-500 meters. Although I do note that Canalaska's developing a nice project at MacArthur West at 850, which is the same depths we're looking at, so that we know they're there. But the cost of drilling those projects and the exploration work involved is expensive. So a small explorer such as ourselves, budgets of $4 or $5 million on an exploration program is really beyond what we can do. So we developed them up. We introduced the ANT, ambient noise tomography, from fleet space into the basin. Worked extremely well, along with the classical V10, Z10 electromagnetics, along with gravity, along with mag and structural targeting. So a lot of science involved. And with that, we developed some very good targets on our Pasfield project. As you said last time, we were negotiating that agreement. That agreement is now closed. So that they are obliged to drill our Pasfield target 4 and possibly target 3 in 2025, which is coming very soon. So that does two things. One is it tests those targets, but on the other side, it also takes those expenditure commitments off us so that we can then concentrate on other projects that are a little shallower and fall more in the $1 to $2 million per annum budget expenditure range. Near shallower, obviously. We'd like to drill, so the drilling on those projects is also less. So we looked at what 92 Energy and Basin had done on their projects just to the east of the basin edge, with very good access, and we negotiated a backup agreement with Spire on the Spire and Horizon projects, also with Atha. And we've been very active in there. So we've completed our first field program. We've done reconnaissance. And we're now just completed the flying the Excite system, which is mag, gravity, and radiometrics over those projects. We'll evaluate that over the winter season and look to mobilise rigs in there in the next summer. I'm talking Northern Hemisphere, of course, back opposite seasons. The important thing, though, is Spire and Horizon. We have very good access. The Spire project's on the major north-south highway, which leads to all the uranium mines. Horizon sits on a road that's being built out to one of the First Nations communities at Wollaston Lake, and that's a great road. So we're getting an all-weather, all-season road built right through Horizon, something in the order of $100 million Canadian, courtesy of the Canadian government and our First Nations partners.
Oh,
So that'll be the first time we'll have really good access into there. There's some old float samples in there, up to 3% uranium. So nice looking area, but was difficult to access. So we'll be excited to get in there next summer. And that's really allowed us to put together a whole program of work for 2025. Look out, 12, 18 months ahead and plan things properly. So we're pretty excited.
Yeah, brilliant, Andrew. And sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there because I want to sort of knuckle down on each one of those projects.
Sure.
So now you've completed the agreement with Atha, and now I wanted to sort of drill down on your Pasfield Lake project, which you mentioned. What are sort of the key exploration objectives that you have for that project, and how does your current partnership with Atha enhance that project's potential?
Well, we have a very strong conductors there in the basement. And the types of deposits we're looking for are what's called unconformity or sandstone hosted deposits. So these are the uranium deposits that occur right at the base of the sandstone or just immediately in the sandstone just above. There's some very unusual geology there which generates uranium deposits in the range of 5 to 25% uranium. In other words, that's up to a quarter of the rock being uranium. So absolutely, there's nothing else like it in the world. But they also tend to be quite small and difficult to explore for. So again, the testing of those by drilling is expensive. And we introduced ANT, ambient noise tomography, into the basin 2 years ago. It's now been picked up by all the players. We identified the Cable Bay Shear Zone, which is where we're looking at, and the Pasfield Lake impact feature itself, which is a big circular, probably meteor impact. So we've got a combination of structures, we've got the right host geology, and the ANT, we were looking to map the shape of the basement. So we were looking to map the stratigraphy, which it did extremely well. But what was surprising was that we're also seeing the alteration in the sandstone above. So we know there's something happening in the sandstone because we can see it in the ANT. But of course, we've got to put the rotary lie detector down and test it. And we'll find out. We know there's something there because it's showing in the geophysics. Our hope is that it'll be an ore body and it'll be the next major ore body in the basin. And we're talking deposits of 50 million pounds and upwards. These are big, big deposits.
Sure. Pasfield sounds like a very, very exciting project. Now, moving on, Andrew, to Spire Horizon. You did mention before in terms of access, but what are your initial sort of exploration plans for those projects and sort of the key geological targets that you're pursuing over there?
Yeah, so these are basement hosted. So these are more deposits in the 1 to 5% range, which is lower grade, still pretty brilliant compared to the rest of the world. I mean, everybody would get very excited, but for Athabasca, they're just ordinary. But they can be very large, and they extend over a larger area. So they're associated with structures in the basement. So if you like, they're the feeder zones below the unconformity ones, which have now been eroded off. But they're still substantial deposits, and they're more like the ones that NextGen are developing at Arrow in the western part of the basin. And 92 Energy found one at Gemini. So these are nice little projects. But they're also easier to find. So all we have to deal with as far as cover is concerned is glacial cover. The whole area has been glaciated. We have 10 to 20 metres of glacial cover. Tends to screen things a little bit. But we've flown recently the Excite system, which has just completed. The results are being analysed using high-resolution radiometrics, looking for traces of boulder trains. We know there's some nice boulders with high-grade uranium in them. We've just got to track them down to their source. And as I say, our plan then is to do field work on those over the next 6 months, leading to drilling next summer. But they'll be shorter holes using a reconnaissance rig. So we're talking more 200 metre drill holes rather than 1,000 metre drill holes that are really beyond our capacity.
Right. That's so interesting, Andrew. So in summary, Pasfield, you've got sort of more of your higher grade, smaller load, a little bit more difficult to target. But if you get it, obviously the network would be incredible, more efficient to extract out of the ground versus Spire Horizon, which is, more of a sort of larger area, a bit more disseminated mineralization, easier to target, easier to find.
Easier to find, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
We hope so. Hope so. We'll be into that. And then of course, we've got other projects in the basin where we've got 9 projects in total over almost 200,000 hectares. So it's a
Yes,
big land holding.
I wanted to chat to you about AMA, the lake acquisition that you did as well. So that AMA Lake project, how does that contribute to the company's sort of overall investment strategy and thesis?
That's another one where we were very much focused on what can we do in the sort of 1 million, 2 million price range bracket. It was a dormant project, it's a little further north and a little remote. The geology is very different. So it's a disseminated uranium deposit in a sandstone. It's what we call strata bound, so it's sitting within a particular layer. It has a strike extent of several kilometres, relatively low grade, but it's right at surface. But the thing that really interested us was it's very close to excellent infrastructure. So it's right next to a very large gold mine called Meadowbank, operated by a company called Agnico Eagle, third largest gold miner in the world. Massive operation, and those guys are excellent miners, and they've really changed the view because you're dealing with a remote community up there of First Nations. They're a little bit nervous about mining and what it does to the environment. But fortunately, we had a leader in a company that takes this sort of thing very seriously, very sensitive about the environment, putting funds back into the community, building skills. So we're only 20 kilometres away from their current operating mine. So if we can close that, but as I say, the guy who vended the project into us is a prospector. He's a little difficult to find at times, and it's taken us a lot longer. So we do apologise to our shareholders, but we are tracking it down. It will close, but the next field season will likely be next summer.
Yeah, Andrew, I think with every sort of exploration stage, company or project, there's always those sort of access and, native issues. But, Canada is a tier 1 jurisdiction for mining, as we know. And so it's probably one of the less risky places to do exploration and get access. So, yeah, well done on that.
Well,
yes.
Yeah, we were very much focused on that, Jess, because it's one thing to make a discovery, but it's another thing to build it. And you'll know in Australia in particular, a lot of the guys who've got good uranium deposits, it's taking them years and years and years to go through the permitting process.
Yeah.
Whereas we know in a place like Saskatchewan, they are pro-mining. They have the biggest and best mines in the world. They have the nuclear generation for their own power. I mean, it's just part of the business there. You have to still do it, and you have to go through the process. But we know that it's just a process. As long as you do things properly, if we make a discovery, we will be able to build it. We will get the permits, we can operate, and we have 3 major treatment plants in the area that are looking for feed for their process plants. So these are plants that are already permitted, they're built, and they're looking for feedstock. So if we can make a discovery, they'll partner with us. We're an explorer. They'll partner with us to develop those deposits and generate wealth for both themselves and our shareholders.
Yeah, certainly lots of sort of strategic moving parts and opportunities that could arise. Yeah, your portfolio of quite diverse uranium assets, because they are diverse in terms of location, but also in terms of mineralization. So really interesting. And now talking on that, so what will the company's sort of exploration focus be? Where are you targeting first? You mentioned you won't go and do exploration work in the winter. So when can we start to sort of see some news flow? Where will you start? What will you start? What's the plan?
Yeah, we certainly we've done work on Spire and Horizon right now, which has just been wrapped up. We'll be evaluating those results. There's geochemistry, geophysics results. They'll be coming out over January, February, which is a nice time to come out because there's a lot happening. We'll also be working on Pasfield East, which is the part of the Pasfield project that didn't go into the Atha joint venture. So we'll be doing some geophysics on that probably in the first quarter of next year. And then as we come into the spring, as soon as the snow melts, we'll be on to Hawk Rock with some ANT. We're very close to signing an agreement with another group who have some adjoining ground. At this stage, it'll be a cooperation agreement where we'll share infrastructure, share helicopters, that sort of thing, and deploy our ANT system there at Hawk Rock. And it's shallower drilling, so it's 250 to 400 metres. Look, it could even be in our drill range, that one. That's a possibility. We're also considering doing some A&T work on Parker. It's a little interesting sort of, not a quirk, but it's the way the system works in Saskatoon is you need to do certain expenditures every year, but there's not this requirement like under an exploration license in Australia to drop half every 2 years or something like that. You just need to meet expenditure commitments. But you can accrue expenditure. So if you do expenditure beyond what's the minimum required, it goes into like a bank. And you can draw on that each year if you're not particularly being active. Now, Parker, we don't have to do any work on it until 2035. Now, that's 11 years away, not 25, 35. So, but that said, it's right on the cable bay. It's very active, and we haven't done any A&T on it yet. So now that A&T has been proven, we've got 25 kilometres of conductors and some very nice structural targets. So as A&T becomes more and more developed, we're looking seriously at doing some work on Parker, possibly in partnership with somebody else. That would be very nice. And then we have those projects then sitting in what we call drill ready. In other words, we've done everything, including the A&T. We might have a $3 or $4 million exploration program that we would like to do. And then we'll talk to various partners, both currently active in the basin and those nearby, to drill those targets. So that we sort of have them sitting there. You either drill them in summer or winter, and they can be drilled in either one. So that would be ideal.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. Now, how does the company plan to finance this exploration program? I know you mentioned, you need to do you're building a portfolio of targets, should we say, that are drill ready, that you would either partner with. But how does the company intend to sort of finance these early stage exploration activities, should we say?
Yeah, so we've done a few things. One is we've cut, now that we're an established explorer, we've tightened up our corporate structure and got our budget down to what's pretty much a minimum, sort of around under $1 million a year, which is pretty good to run our corporate guys. And then at the same time, we've contracted all our activities in the Athabasca to Axiom Exploration Group, who are a very large group based in Saskatoon. And that's working very well for us because they work with a number of the other operators as well, cut our costs substantially. And we'll focus on developing those projects. At the same time, last year was the first time we accessed the Canadian flow-through share system. So we feel like we now have our expenditure split. So we have a very tight corporate budget, but then all our exploration budgets are financed through flow-through share. So the flow-through share scheme is a Canadian system. And you might say, well, how can an Australian company access it? But we're registered in Canada. We have a Canadian subsidiary that does all the work. It's all set up there to access that. And Saskatchewan have recently increased their allowance for the system from about 1.5 delta. In other words, for every dollar, you get 1.5 times in the bank. And this is all up front. This is not a refund. It's now looking like more like 1.6, 1.7. Which is getting pretty attractive, and will be. So when we have a program ready for actual field work, we access the flow-through system and fund it through that mechanism, which is great for our shareholders because instead of the shareholders having to put it in $1.60, they only put in $1. And the other 60 cents comes courtesy of the Canadian tax system, because believe it or not, uranium is a critical mineral in Canada. It's not in Australia, but it is in Canada. So we can access that system, which is an incentive. I mean, they have built the system to incentivize explorers to do the sort of work we're doing, which is looking for the next major discovery. It's a brilliant system, and it works. And the government have to do very little. The explorers and the financiers and everybody else run it on behalf of the government, and it works extremely well.
Yeah, it's really fantastic that you've got, the Canadian government incentivizing explorers in uranium and actually seeing it as a critical mineral, which arguably it should be seen as, given we've got energy crises around the world, including in Australia.
It should be, yes.
And just on that, uranium as a commodity, what is your outlook for uranium prices in, the medium to the long term? And how do you think that this impacts the company's sort of valuation and investment thesis?
We're an explorer, so unfortunately, as far as values of stock go, we're the bottom of the tree.
Of course.
It's unfortunate, but we're always the last to move. The mid caps and the larger companies are already moving, and they're moving quite strongly.
Yeah.
So they're up in the last half of this year. They've come up strongly. The junior end of the market where we are will follow, because the shortage of uranium supply is a real thing. It's not something that's going to change in the short term. This is something that's been building up for a long time. The growth in the power station industry, especially in places like China, they're commissioning a reactor a month at the moment. This is a full size 1,200 megawatt power station. This is not micro. This is and the French have done it before. The Americans have done it before in previous decades. But once they get rolling and they start building these things one after another, you can get very, very efficient at it. So, we're looking at costs now of, 5 years from start to finish of construction, and costs of about $5 billion US, which sounds like a lot, but they have a life of 60, 70, 80 years. So they last a long time. So with the climate change conference, all the major OECD companies except Australia have all signed up to triple their nuclear power capacity by 2050. Triple, not double. So they've got all those reactors need to be fueled.
Yep.
And they're the only major deposit out there at the moment that's coming on is NextGen's Arrow, and it's only 300 million pounds. I mean that's barely 2 years production.
It's really
it's just gone.
Yeah. Andrew, it's interesting that you say, it's the larger uranium companies and the producers that are actually getting the valuation from the very positive sentiment around uranium and uranium price. But I think, to your point, I think, your smaller stocks, explorers, I think they will get a re-rate, particularly if you start delivering really good results, because as you said, the thematic is there, the fundamentals are there. These OECD countries and companies have, they have signed mandates to triple their energy exposure. So yeah, I think
it's I mean, I think I might be a bit brutal here, but I think Australians overestimate their importance sometimes. In the global scheme of things, we're not much, except that we have a lot of uranium in Australia, and we have a lot of good expertise in exploration, which we're now deploying to other parts of the world. And there's also, with the geopolitical things that are going on, a refocusing. For instance, the United States, they want to focus their production back into the United States. The United States only produces a few million pounds a year. It's tiny. They used to be the largest producer in the world. So things are shifting, and they view Canada very much as part of the United States. You've even heard jokes about it being the next province. Governor Trudeau and that sort of thing. But it's very much, as far as they're concerned, they're very close ties between those two countries. It's an open border. So most of the production that's needed for the US is coming out of Canada. MacArthur River's coming back online. The Key Lake plant's being ramped up again, and the Athabasca Basin is the focus of all that. And the capacity is there. The plant capacity is there. Those three plants can put out almost 100 million pounds a year between the three of them, which is a lot. Yeah. When global production is only about 250, so that's they can do a lot. Yeah. And as a junior, we're right in there, surrounded by companies that are far bigger than us. So people will twig to it sooner or later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're in the right commodity at the right time, I would say. Timing is everything, being an explorer. Well, Andrew, we're running out of time, but I just thought, could you just provide, we've discussed a lot of things, diverse assets in uranium, great country to be in, lots of incentives for explorers, developers, and also obviously the uranium price. But could you give our small caps audience just 2 or 3 key investment takeaways as to why T92 should be on their investor stock watch list?
I think it's because we're one of the few operators that's now well established in the best uranium province in the world. We can operate there. We can operate at very economical rates and keep our presence active. We're well supported by the community, the active exploration community there. We're well known, and we're leading through to discovery, that's the big thing with an explorer. When you make a discovery, you go 10 or 20 times because you go from nothing to being a major player. So it's high risk, high reward, and that's what we offer.
Absolutely. Modern day treasure hunting.
A bit like that.
Wonderful, Andrew. Well, thank you so much as always. It's great to catch up, and yeah, good luck with everything. I look forward to watching the company closely and the news flow with all of your sort of exploration programs that you're going to push out into 2025, and look forward to catching up in the new year.
Thanks very much, Jess.